just carry on yakking. It's fine. Hello, everybody. We're now live on UK Comic Book Club, and I'm here talking to two fantastic. They've used Philippas and Nikki Smith. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Could you tell us a little bit about Little White Lies, please?
Sure. So Little White Lies is a domestic suspense novel, and it's about the White family whose daughter has been missing for 7 long years. But the book actually begins where most stories end, with the miraculous news that Abigail White has been found alive and is now coming home.
Oh, intriguing. And how about you, Nikki? Could you tell us about your book?
My debut novel is called All in Her Head, and like Philippas, it's also a psychological suspense thriller. And it's about the darkest corners of a mother's mind. My protagonist, Alison, thinks she's being stalked by her ex-husband, Jack, until the mention of one name turns her world upside down. And without giving too much away, because it does have a big twist in it, I'd just say, is everything first as it seems, or is it all in her head?
Yeah, really intriguing concepts. They've both got dual narratives. How did they work? Let's start with you, Philippa. No.
That's a great question. So we were just talking before we came on air about drafts, and for about 12 drafts out of 20 odd, or whatever it took to finally finish Little White Lies, it was actually all written in one point of view, and I'll let your viewers see if they can guess which point of view was the original one. It was when I submitted to my now agent, she suggested that I write it in 2 different points of view. And I had to basically go right back to the drawing board and first of all learn how to even do that, because I've never written in dual narrative before. And then I really had to rewrite pretty much everything in the book. But I really felt that made a huge difference to how I was telling the story. It was definitely the right decision. And funnily enough, the book that I'm writing now, which is actually my 3rd book, has 3 points of view. So I've clearly become a multiple narrative writer after being totally terrified of the whole idea. So yeah.
And how did that work for you then, Nikki?
Similar to Philippa, actually, interestingly. I started off writing mine from one point of view, from the protagonist Alison's point of view, and then I realised that the book would work much better if it was also, the story was told from the point of view of her ex-husband Jack as well. And I think for the particular story that I was telling, I really wanted to get a male perspective in there as well as a female's perspective. So that's why I also had to go back and kind of change a lot of it and redraft. And I think with mine as well, because the book is kind of set in 3 different parts, and you kind of flip backwards and forwards in time. So you've got the kind of dual narrative, and you've also got the kind of time flipping backwards and forwards. So I think I set myself up with quite a complicated structure from the beginning, but it worked out okay in the end.
Going back to how you both started, could you give us a bit of background about why you both decided to write? We'll start with you, Nikki, this time.
Yeah, well, I'd written a novel after I left university. I did an English degree many years ago at Birmingham, and I loved writing. I wanted to write. I wrote a novel. It was rubbish, looking back on it. Not obviously, didn't think that at the time, but it was rubbish. I sent it off to a few agents, but I had no knowledge of the publishing industry. got rejected. I think I got there were a couple of people who were vaguely interested, but no offers or anything like that. And at that point, I just thought, this isn't for me. I don't know. I just thought you kind of either were or you weren't a writer, or, you know, an author, and would end up getting published. I didn't realise that, you know, there would be rounds and rounds of rejections. I didn't have a clue, really. So I think at that point, I just thought, right, that's it, not going to do it. So I went off and kind of developed a career in finance, had a couple of children. I still wrote stuff, but nothing that I showed anybody, just things for me. And then about 3 years ago, I had somebody contacted me on Facebook, a girl that I used to go to school with, and I hadn't seen her since we left school, kind of 20 years before. And she said, oh, you know, hi, you know, nice to see you're, you know, still alive and things. And did you ever do anything with your writing? Because I still remember the stories that you used to read out at school. And that was a real now or never moment. So I thought, right, I'm going to do something. I'm going to at least try. So I signed up for a Curtis Brown creative course, and did that for 3 months. Went on it with the idea of the first of my novel, and did a first draft in those 3 months. I was writing reasonably quickly then. But I was obviously still, you know, I was still working and things at the time, in my kind of normal job. But I was just determined to do it, I think. And it also taught me, I think the course taught me an awful lot about the publishing industry that I was completely unaware of. So, you know, how to approach an agent, you know, how to do a decent cover letter, you know, how to write a synopsis, all the things that I hadn't really kind of thought about, I guess, before. And so, yeah, that gave me the kind of confidence, I think, to kind of carry it through to the end. Obviously finished the course, and then rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it, as Philippa will know, and you'll know as well, Alex, numerous times, and eventually ended up with my agent, who I've got now, who gave me some very good advice on the things that still needed changing. So we worked on the book for probably about another 4 months after I signed with her. And then we sent it to off to Orion, and I was very lucky. I got a kind of preempt for a 2-book offer.
Yeah. Any different for you then?
Did you ask me? Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, any different for you?
Some similarities and some differences. So I think a little bit like Nikki, I quite enjoyed writing, and I loved English at school. But always just did it kind of for fun. I didn't really think of it as any different from any of the other activities I was doing at that point. And then I went on to study psychology at university, and then I took up a career as a clinical psychologist. And that career path is quite all-consuming. It's quite a vocation, really. It's there's not a lot of room necessary to do lots of other things in your life. But a few years after qualifying, so I'd been in that career for a little while, and it was a little bit more steady, a little bit more sort of predictable. I had a week off when I was changing jobs. So I'd finished up with all my clients in my old job, but I hadn't started my new job yet, so didn't have any new clients, didn't have any caseload. And it was a bit like this kind of bit in my brain just opened up, this creative cavern. And I got the first line of a novel in my head and was like, I'll write a novel, that'll be fun. And again, a bit like Nikki, it was rubbish. And like, it will never see the light of day. It's very, yeah, it's not for public consumption, trust me. But I really enjoyed I did actually really enjoy writing it, because there was no deadlines, there was no pressure, I didn't have any expectations, I didn't have any particular ambitions, I just wanted to give it a go. And then I linked in with what's now known as Jericho Writers, and started to meet some other people who were writing and starting to kind of get into that world a little bit. And after binning that novel, which is still in the bin, I started writing short stories. So I spent about probably about 5 or 6 years writing short stories, and was submitting them to literary magazines and journals and competitions, and starting to get some published and some placed in competitions and things like that. So I was really building my confidence that maybe writing was something that I could actually do and maybe be all right at. And then I left my full-time job in the NHS in 2015 and set up my own practice, which allowed me to work part-time. And that's when I thought, now's the time to have another go at a novel, because a bit like you were saying earlier, Alex, before we came online, you know, it's a lot of time it's finding the time. And I had more time. I had more time to do a bigger project. And so I began Little White Lies at that point. Many drafts later. So that was, I started it in 2015, December 2015, and 2020 was the year it came out, just to give you a sense of timescales. And that wasn't a particularly long journey for that first book. But again, I had quite a few years of writing short stories and things before that as well. So it's been about a 10-year journey for me altogether.
It's a long journey, isn't it? What made you decide to do psychology then, Philippa, as your genre choice?
To write psychological books, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your genre choice, yeah.
Yeah. I think actually I massively got into reading psychological thrillers after reading Gone Girl. And I know it's like people talk about Gone Girl all the time, and it's a bit cliche to mention that book, but it was a real revelation for me, because up until that point, I'd mainly had a diet of Penguin classics and literary fiction, which wasn't a bad place to start with your reading, but I didn't really read a lot of commercial. And then Gone Girl came out, and it was the first time that I'd read a book that was a total page turner, but also really sophisticated in the writing, the prose, and also the themes that it was exploring. And that's not to say that there weren't other books out there like that before. Of course there were. I just hadn't read them. And I just felt that. And then obviously there's lots more books that came out in that genre, and I just felt that the genre was a really exciting place to explore, a bit like Nikki was saying, some really important themes and aspects of particularly women's lives, in a way that's really gripping and exciting to read. And I think I always have kind of a dark side. Like I was, to be honest, I was a little bit worried when uplit was a big trend, because I was like, I don't know how to write uplit. But I mean, the thriller genre, the psychological thriller, psychological suspense genre seems to continue going from strength to strength, and it keeps evolving. So I think there's always a new corner, a new element of it to explore.
Why did you decide to do that then, Nick?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with Philippa. I was also blown away by Gone Girl. I think it's the ability to undermine a reader's expectations. You think you're going one way, and then you kind of slip the mat away from them and change completely the direction that you're going. Really well written and incisive, and also very strong female characters, I think, is one of the hallmarks of a lot of psychological kind of thrillers, and that's what I knew I wanted to write, something like that. but I was just laughing at your uplit comment, because I felt exactly the same way when uplit was the, you kept hearing all these agents on Twitter and things talking about how uplit was going to be the next thing, and it did make me as well go, oh no, I can't write that kind of thing. So but then I think, just looking at your kind of the crime book club, Alex, is, it's amazing the number of members you've got who obviously love the kind of darker side of things, whether that's kind of full on just crime or whether that's kind of psychological thriller kind of type crime. So I think it'll continue.
Yeah, when you both got involved with the Diary of a Debut, what do you think you learned from all the members on that Facebook group? Start with Nikki this time.
Oh,
can I just say I can't hear either of you right now.
Oh, I can hear you, Philippa.
I don't know what's happened.
I can.
Sorry.
If you want to just pop out and pop in again, I can hear you, but I don't know. Could you write a note down and tell me just to pop out and pop in again? Just write it down so I can.
There we go.
There we go.
I think she's going to go out and come back in again.
Yeah.
And I can. Oh, there we go. Yes. I can tell you a bit about the kind of debut group whilst we're waiting for. Can you hear me now, Philippa?
Oh dear, I still can't hear you.
Can you hear us, Philippa?
If I can get Sam to write the questions down in the.
I might need to leave you guys to continue on the conversation.
Oh, she hasn't. Maybe
I'll see if I can fix it, but you guys carry on.
Yeah. Okay, then. Yeah. Come back in a second.
Okay. Yeah. So debut-wise, both Philippa and I are members of the Debut 2020 group. So basically in about, I think it was April 2019, the group was set up. I think there was a number of us who were launching books in 2020, and we were all members of the Savvy Group of Authors, which is just a group on Facebook for
on your Facebook thing. So, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so we kind of all met in this group that kind of has a number of authors in it, and decided that as we were all going to be launching our novels in 2020, we'd kind of branch off and create a bit of a side group, because we were asking each other questions that were probably quite boring to everybody else because they've already been authors for years often, and we were the newbies. So there were 7 of us, I think, originally who started it, and then the groups kind of just got bigger and bigger, and I think there's about 75 of us now. And throughout 2019, we were really there to offer each other support and answer any questions that anyone had, that kind of thing. And then obviously towards the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, we could see lockdown coming and the pandemic, and suddenly realised that in fact the landscape that we were going to launch our books into was going to be very different to the one that we'd originally expected. So at that point, the group decided to get a bit more proactive, and we set up a Twitter account and kind of basically actively promoted each other's books, and then decided, one of our members, Emma Christie, decided to run a virtual festival, online festival for debut authors. So she set up a series of panels, and the festival ran throughout September. And I think there was generally about 6 authors on each panel. Philippa was on one of them, and I was on another, talking about different topics each time for about an hour. I think we did it, and then gave the audience an opportunity to ask any questions at the end. So we had I think it was quite a lot of aspiring writers just wanted to know, how we got an agent, how we got a deal, what happened, what's the process of editing, any questions really. So that's been great, and it's given us a chance to obviously publicise our books to people who might not have heard of us otherwise. And I think Emma's looking at what will happen to the group, kind of the Diary of a Debut Novelist kind of going forward. But meanwhile, our kind of debut 2020 group will carry on as normal, and we'll just be kind of going forward and hopefully launching our second books next year for most of us.
What have you got lined up for the second book? I was looking and
yes, yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to get a 2-book deal, so my second book will be coming out in hardback in April 2021, hopefully. Everybody keep your fingers crossed, COVID permitting, and it's called Look What You Made Me Do. So it's another psychological thriller, and it's about families and their darkest secrets.
Can you hear us now, Philippa?
I can. I logged out and logged back in again. That seemed
Sorry.
No problem at all. I mean, I've had interviews where I've been talking to the author. The author couldn't even see me; they could only hear my voice. So that's quite, yeah. No problem.
What a shame.
Yeah. So, Philippa was just talking about the Diary of a Debut section, and I believe you were on the editing part. That was part 4, I think. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, as I think Nikki was saying, it was really fun to do, and
is that to Philippa, Alex?
Oh
yeah.
I don't know. Can you hear us, Philippa?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Oh.
Yeah, I think Nikki might have.
Is it now? Can you hear me, Alex?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Oh,
Can you hear us, Nikki?
I can hear you. I can't hear Philippa.
Okay. Turns out Nikki can hear me, but she can't hear you. So.
I'll just go on.
But if we just go like that.
When Philip is finished, I'll hold my hand up, and then you'll know when to go next. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun, and I quite liked going on the editing panel because I did a lot of editing for Little White Lies, and it was a pretty major part of getting this book sorted, and it was really nice just to hear all these other authors' experiences, kind of what was similar but also what was different. And I think hopefully it was really helpful to people who are writing now and aiming to get agents, aiming to get publishing deals, to sort of reassure them that it's okay to not get your first draft to be very good. It's okay if your first draft is really, really, really pants, and for them to know that really the bulk of getting a novel to work is rewriting. There's writing, but most of it is really rewriting, and not to be scared of that, and not to think that you're doing it wrong if you have to do 20 drafts, because I did and it worked out okay. So yeah, it was good. It was lovely. The whole festival has been really great, and thanks to Emma Christie for setting it up. Her book is called The Silent Daughter.
I believe Sam did an interview with her early in the month, if anyone wants to have a look for that. Yeah. If can you hear us, Nikki?
I can hear you.
Yeah. If we can talk about the writing process and how you do that during the day now. Yeah.
Yes, I was obviously lucky enough with getting a 2-book deal that I was able to stop my kind of job. I was working as a kind of in the head of finance for a trampoline park, actually, and so I gave that up and went freelance when I got my book deal. So I still do some of that type of work, but not as much as I did. So up until the pandemic hit, I was basically working most of the time in school hours. So I've got 2 daughters. I dropped them at school. I'd write through the school day, and then if I needed to, write again in the evening or at weekends to get the word count in. But obviously, when we all went into lockdown at the end of March, I had 2 kids at home, so writing became a lot more difficult. I think it did for everybody, whether you had kids at home or not, but certainly headspace wise, it didn't seem to be much, and I think just the physical practicalities of getting meals ready and them sorted out and helping them a bit with schoolwork, that kind of thing, I'd say it was quite tough. So it's been easier since, well, I would say easier since they went back in September, but my youngest managed 8 days back before somebody in her year was diagnosed as COVID positive. So she had to self-isolate. So she goes back on Wednesday. So we're all keeping everything very much crossed that she will stay at school rather, and that I'll go back to that writing routine again. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Complicated. Yeah. How about you, Philippa? What's your writing day like? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nikki, I didn't hear anything that you said, but I'm sure it was great. So I can't even compare mine. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I feel quite lucky in a way in that I now my psychology work, I do a full clinic on a Friday and I do some administrative work on a Thursday for my psychology practice, but otherwise the rest of the days in the week, including the weekends, are really free for writing, which is a massive luxury. So I normally try to get my writing done. I like to get it done in the morning, but one of the things that I noticed that was really odd is that with Little White Lies, I tended to start work on that at about 8:30 in the morning and sort of have the bulk of whatever I tried to do that day done by kind of 12. And then with book 2, it was like I couldn't get going before about 11. And then with the third book, I couldn't seem to get going before about 1. So it was like my brain couldn't use that space in a day for a different book. It was kind of weird. But I didn't want to get too out of hand. So at the moment I tend to start about 11, which sounds quite lazy, and maybe it is, but this is when I'm doing a first draft. So I try to do about 2,000 words a day for a first draft, and that usually, because like I was talking to these guys about before we came on air, I just write really quick and really dirty. So that usually takes me maybe about 2 hours, but I'm pretty kind of brain dead after that. And we were having a chat actually on our debut Facebook group about typical word counts that well-known authors use, and it does tend to cluster around 1,000 or 2,000 words a day. And I wonder if there's just not enough brain capacity to do a lot more than that. I think it's quite unusual for people to bash out more words than that day after day. So I normally try and do about 2,000 words a day, and then often I have a little nap in the afternoon because I'm tired. When I'm editing, I'll do longer hours, so I may do 6 hours a day of editing, because it's still hard work, but I don't think it's quite as taxing creatively. I think you can kind of keep at it for longer. So yeah, and I have some ritual things. So I have a pair of trousers that I always wear. I'll try and show you. They're like these floppy, like pajama-y trousers that I always like to wear. And I always put the same CD on, which is a terrible CD. Wait a minute. Daily Mail Romantic Classics.
Lovely.
I have that on repeat. It's got some nice tracks on it.
Okay. Well, you always got to have something on in the background, don't you? Yeah.
I can't. That's weird.
Yeah, it kind of these things just get me in the zone, I think.
Yeah. You can't do that then, Nikki.
No, I can't listen to anything. I mean, sometimes I'll play a song to kind of get into the mind of one of my characters before I start writing. But I can't have any music on at all when I'm actually writing. It's just too distracting. I have to have silence. So I've got my noise cancelling headphones that I wear, and then nobody in the house can kind of shout at me. I just ignore everybody and get on with it.
When do you actually show it to the family? At what point have you decided to show it to the family, if you do?
Never. Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. My family have read Little White Lies. Probably the only person who you might expect to have read it within my kind of close circle that hasn't is my husband, and I think that's probably mainly to protect our marriage. I think I don't really write in a genre that he would typically read, and I think I don't say that he can't read it, but I would feel so embarrassed if he read it and didn't enjoy it, and he would feel awful and he wouldn't know what to say. So maybe he'll read it at some point, and not tell me. But I would only tend to let them read the finished article. Although saying that, that's not even quite true, because actually I give quite an early draft to my sister, my older sister, who is a pretty voracious reader as well, and is kind of my target audience. And because she's my older sister, she's very critical of me. So she's not going to just say like, "It's lovely, well done." And she's got a really kind of astute, she's got really good comments. So I can kind of share it with her before I share it with my agent, and all the most embarrassing things my sister can help me deal with. And then the slightly less embarrassing things my agent can help me deal with. And hopefully by the time I have to send it to the publisher, it's not too embarrassing. So yeah, that's probably my family's involvement. And my mum always helps me with plot holes. She's really good at plot holes. When I'm in a total panic about them, she's very calm and she can like problem solve them with me. So that's quite good.
Yeah. How do you deal with that then, Nikki?
Well, similar to Philippa, actually, my husband tends to only read non-fiction type books. He doesn't read a lot of fiction at all. So he did read All in Her Head, and was very nice about it, actually, but I don't think he had a choice. I don't know if he'll read the second one. He's not kind of shouting out for it at the moment, which is fine by me. And both my daughters read it, actually. They're 13 and 15. And one of them listened to it on audio and the other one read it. And they love it. But that's I'm their mum, so they're probably going to say that anyway. So I wouldn't ever give them. I wouldn't ever give my husband, an early draft to read and kind of criticize. It's just. Like Philippa, I think it's best, save the marriage and don't do that at all. That's reserved for my agent. Really is the first person that I go to with my drafts, and she kind of has a look at it and can give me an honest opinion about it and what needs to be done.
As Nikki's just said about family listening to it on audio, what was the audiobook like? Have you heard yours?
Yeah. Actually, I had a really nice experience with the audiobook. So first of all, my editor sent me through some clips of the actors they were planning to use. They had two different ones, one for the voice of Anne, who's the mother of the missing girl who returns, and another voice for the character called Jess, who's the teenage cousin of Abigail, who comes home. And I like both of them. I think they're both really happy with them. And then my publishers arranged for me to go down and listen to a recording session at their studios in London. This was just before this would been like maybe last November, so before lockdown and everything happened. I got to go into the studio and just watch them recording. And it's a really intensive process. Like, I really take my hat off to the the actors who do it. You know, they kind of just, they're in a room for like 8 hours just reading the text, and then sometimes they make a mistake and they have to go back and do it again. But yeah, I haven't since then listened to the audiobook, but you know, I think from hearing the clips, I think they've done a really lovely job. And from what I heard the actress recording in the studio, it sounded really great. I'm really annoyed because I've forgotten the name of the actress who did it, but I'll try and remember and let you know.
Yeah. That's the way that I listened to the books, and they both came across really well. When it comes to the second book, though, have you learned anything from the first book that you carry on with the second? We'll go with Nikki again for that one.
Oh, I think it's odd actually, because I'd love to say that I'd managed to find a writing process that worked perfectly, and I just did this, and this, and then, you know, step 1 to 5, and I'd be able to kind of come out with a second book. But it's not like that. So I think I've learnt that you don't need to get everything perfect the first time round. So I think initially when I was first writing All in Her Head, I wanted to get everything perfect before I moved on. And that took obviously a long time. And in a lot of cases, it was a complete waste of time, because those words end up getting cut all over the place. And so it's much better, I think, to try and get the bones of the story down, work out where you're going and what you want to say. And then you can kind of fix a lot of things when you come back to it in a second draft. But I would say that I think I've probably learned to plan more as well, just because the first time you write a book, well, the first time I wrote a book for All in Her Head, the story kind of developed very slowly as I went along. I had a lot more time. I didn't have an agent. There wasn't any pressure. So I could go at my own pace. Whereas when I needed to get a second book out, basically within a year of the first one being released, I was under a lot more time pressure, and I needed to work out kind of where I was going definitively before I kind of started writing it. So I think I have become more of a planner than a pantser. I can't plan completely. I don't plan everything, because otherwise I'd worry that it would, I think, get a bit boring when I was writing it. But I do have a definite idea, much more than just a beginning and an end, which is what I had probably when I was doing All in Her Head. When I was planning, look what you made me do, I had probably a middle, a quarter, a half, 3/4, and the end. So I had a kind of structure to write around.
Yeah. By the time you'd finish your second one, you're saying that your third one's got 3 narrative voices. Do you split the writing time between doing that section and then do the next narrative voice when you get to it next, or do you just do it in a flow?
Yeah. So yeah, the way that I'm writing it at the moment, and this is the third book. I'm just kind of writing it in the chronology of the story, so I'm flipping between points of view as I go. I don't think that's necessarily the only way to do it. I'm imagine some writers write all in one character and voice first, and then the second, and then piece them together. For me, because I, some of the scenes could have been written from any of the characters' points of view. I kind of needed to write the story to sort of get a sense of who should tell this scene, who should tell that scene, and just to kind of keep the sense of the actual overall plot line working through, and not lose track of what's actually happening. So it's been quite fun, and I'm writing it. It's got 3 points of view, but it's written in third person, so it's kind of easier to switch between them rather than if you were writing in first person, where you've got to get right inside each different character's head. Whereas there's a kind of link in that there's a very sort of very subtle narrator, I guess, that is kind of observing all of them. So I think that makes it easier to shift between. It's an interesting question, actually. If I was writing it in first person, would I do it differently? Maybe I would. Maybe I would stick with one more than I do now when I'm writing in third person. Never thought about that before, Alex. I'll have to go and ponder that. Yeah, it's got me thinking.
When we were waiting to come back, we were talking about Nikki's second book. Could you give us a little bit about that, or is it too secret?
Oh yeah, no. The second book. You're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my second book is called Safe and Sound, and it's out in February 2021. So any moment now, really, and you can pre-order it if you would like. But it's another sort of domestic suspense novel. It's probably slightly even more structured like a crime novel than Little White Lies was, and it's basically about a young woman who is known to be vivacious, charismatic, friendly, outgoing. Her body is found in her flat. She's died in her flat somehow. But the most bizarre thing is that her body has lain there undiscovered for 10 months. And the story is about what's happened, basically, and how she's ended up in that position. And I have a protagonist who is trying to put all the pieces together. But while she does, she's unraveling herself.
Wow, that sounds really different. Yeah. I shall definitely be reading that one, I think. What would you say, Nikki, is the best tip for aspiring writers that you come up?
Well, I'd say resilience. I think that you just have to be resilient, and everybody who is a published author will tell you that they have had multiple rejections, and try not to get disheartened by that. It's all part of the process, and just kind of keep going. I would say just if it's something that you want to do, just keep writing, and you will get there in the end. And don't compare yourself to anybody else, because everybody's path is very different. And if you start doing that, you'll kind of just end up going a bit mad, I think. So just keep going with what you want to do, and you will get there.
How about you, Philippa? Have you got any tips?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what you said, Nikki, so I apologise if this just repeats your fantastic advice. I would probably sum it up by saying, if you want to be a published writer and do it as seriously as that, which you don't have to, that's absolutely fine, then I would encourage you to try and become an expert in the field. And that doesn't mean being the expert in the field of books and writing, but try to become an expert, i.e. try to know more about it than Joe Blogs on the street. A little bit like what Nikki was saying earlier on about just having a sense of what you need to do and what the kind of pathway is. And by being an expert, I think that would cover a number of things. So it would mean read a lot. If you want your book to be published, then read lots of books, become an expert in reading books and knowing what's out there and knowing what's being published and knowing what you like and knowing how other authors do it. Get feedback, get feedback on your work to make you better, to help you improve, and so that you can not be a crappy writer, but be a good writer. And I think being an expert also means learning the craft. So understanding things like show versus tell and points of view and story structure and all these kind of things. Like don't assume you don't need to know that stuff, because I think your writing will be immeasurably better if you do. And lastly, yeah, try and learn about the industry. You know, those of you who are watching tonight, you're doing the right thing. You're looking out for information about how do people do it, how do people get published, what's the process, and there's loads of information for free online all about that, about agents, about submissions, about the publishing industry. And the more that you know, the more confident you'll be, and the less you're likely to make missteps. I mean, we all do. We've all done something that wasn't very helpful to getting published, but you know, the more you know, the better, basically. So try and think of yourself as trying to become an expert. Learn as much as you can, teach yourself as much as you can.
Great advice there. I think as we've got 15 minutes, I'll deal with some audience questions. If you could, can you read them on the side, or
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Can you see them, Nikki?
Yeah.
if we can start with you, Philippa, and then you could just pick one, and then I'll ask Nikki the same question.
So I think there's some from Sam. I'll do this one. Do you work on more than one project at a time? I think that's a great question. And I think for me, generally, I prefer to work on one thing at a time. That's kind of my personality. I'm more of a kind of, I'm not a kind of flitting person, but some people are. Sometimes people get too bored if they're just doing one thing, and I think they need to have things they can dip in and out of. For me, I prefer to be doing kind of one thing at a time, so working on one book, one novel. Being a published author, that sounds so pretentious, sorry. But once you're kind of in that place of having a contract and things like that, you don't get so much choice. So it's really typical, in order to keep to deadlines and timescales, then you need to sort of be able to flip back and forth. So it'd be really common to be writing your early drafts of one book while doing rounds of edits on the previous book, or even trying to draw up maybe some ideas or a mini synopsis for a next book. Plus you need to be able to flit and do events like this and you know, sort of promoting your book and talking to readers about your book. So you do have to multitask a little bit. I think learning how to juggle that is a bit of a skill as well.
Yeah. What about you, Nikki? Have you got any kind of things about balancing projects and stuff?
I mean, I'd agree with what Philippa said, really. You have got to be able to juggle writing one book with the edits that are coming in on another book still. And I'm also like Philippa, I do like to have one thing on the go at one time. That's just how my head works as well. I find it very difficult to kind of dip into one book and then go back to another book. So I kind of, if I get edits, like structural edits, I prefer to kind of hit them very hard and write, you know, do them over a shortest period of time as possible. And if that means I have to work kind of 16-hour days, that's what I'd rather do, because I'm completely immersed in the story, you know, in order to get those done and then move on to something else. So I think you do have to be prepared to kind of move between, you know, writing and editing. And as Philippa said, I think particularly at the moment, with us all still relatively in lockdown and not being able to get out and do kind of, you know, events in bookshops and things like that and panels, obviously you've got to be prepared to, you know, spend the time, you know, doing events like this and kind of talking to other authors online and, you know, doing a bit of the kind of social media side of things. So on Twitter and Instagram, just keeping up with things. So that's how I try and balance it.
What do you do with your downtime then, Nikki, when you're not writing?
I read. I do read. I love reading. I've always loved reading. So, and I'm lucky enough to be sent proofs now. You know, other authors, you know, and their agents will sometimes send me things to read, which is really exciting. If you know that something amazing that you've read is going to come out, you know, in kind of 6 months' time. And then what else do I like doing? Probably watching Netflix series. I'm a bit of a box set addict, so if I find something that I like, then I'll want to watch that all the way through.
Yeah. What do you do then for the downtime?
Like I managed to lip read Nikki, I read. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of reading. I love reading. That's the kind of basis of it all for me. Nap. Um, play with my cat. I'm also one half with my husband of a little folk duo. We perform on the folk music circuit in Lincolnshire. So, I mean, it's all kind of a bit quiet now with lockdown, but normally we're rehearsing and gigging around. And probably the other thing I do in my downtime is I watch quite a lot of true crime stuff on telly, because I think it sparks a lot of ideas. You know, my husband's always saying, "You're watching investigative murder porn again," and I'm like, "Yep." And if I think about it, pretty much all of the ideas I've had, well, for the books 1, 2, and 3 have come off the telly. So, yeah, one way or another. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would you say is your biggest influence then? To say that the ideas have come from, you say your ideas come from telly. So, what's your biggest influence like? Would you say?
Oh, I mean, that's a hard one. I think there's so many, to be honest. I mean, I know I mentioned Gone Girl earlier on. I still credit that with kind of setting me on the path of what I wanted to write. And I think the other thing that kind of sort of helped me keep going and spurred me on was seeing writers within my little network of writers that I'd met at festivals and things getting their agents or getting their publishing deals. It was so exciting to see it happen for them, and it kind of made me think, oh my gosh, it's possible, you know, people do it, this happens. So I think that was a massive inspiration, really. Kind of, there was a writer that I'm thinking of particularly called Amanda Berryman, who wrote a book called Home that came out, I think it was a hardback 2 years ago and paperback this year. Beautiful book. And I remember being at a festival when she got all her agent interest, and it was just so exciting. And yeah, it really inspired me.
Yeah. What about you, Nikki? What was your inspiration?
Yeah, similar, I think. And just I think it was a real doing something that I really wanted to do, but I'd never really kind of put 100% effort into, because I think I was a bit frightened of failing at it. And I think it was really, you know, it was trying to gather together that courage to actually kind of put myself out there and give it a proper go. So I think that was part of it that I really wanted to do. And as Philippa said, I think seeing other writers who I knew kind of getting deals and things like that, it's lovely. Actually, it does. You know, it makes you kind of inspires you to keep going, because you think, well, if they can do it, then maybe I can do it too. So
yeah, that's we've still got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to go back to another audience question. If you could pick one, Nikki.
Yeah. I think Sam's asked, what have been your most memorable moments as an author so far? And I'd say, I think probably some of the most memorable were, I actually got up to a company called Clay's, who are based in Suffolk, just before lockdown. So I think we went into lockdown on about the 22nd of March, and I think I went up there on about the 16th of March and got to see All in Her Head roll off the presses, which was an incredible experience. So it was amazing just seeing how they kind of fit together, the cover and the kind of all the sheets and the book jacket, and they just roll off these huge machines that are obviously printing, my book and lots and lots and lots of other books as well. So that was fabulous. I really, really enjoyed that. And then, not so much the next week when we went straight into lockdown, and all my books, I think, went straight into a warehouse somewhere. But that was still wonderful. And then I think the other thing that's really that I really have valued is getting feedback from readers and other authors. If someone's read the book and they've liked it and contacted me to tell me, that's just been the most amazing feeling, that you can write something that kind of provokes somebody into saying, oh wow, that was really good, I really enjoyed it. I love that.
Yeah, I would love that too. What has been your most memorable moment then, Philippa?
I mean, I think there's kind of lots on the journey. I think, to be honest, my favourite moment in all of this was my launch, actually. I managed to squeeze that in before lockdown. So my local Waterstones, lovely bookshop in Lincoln, which is, I live in Lincolnshire, so that's my local Waterstones. They were great. They were so supportive. I asked them if I could have a launch party in the shop, and they were more than happy. They were lovely. And basically I just had like all my friends and family there, and I had the lovely Laurie van Rensburg, whose book will be coming out in 2022. I don't know if the title's finalized yet, but it's currently called The Downfall. But it's going to be a big one in 2022. Laurie van Rensburg. So she did a little sort of Q&A with me, and I wasn't actually very nervous. I think I felt really proud of the book, and it was just a really lovely chance to celebrate. And I'd already given myself a stern talking to about not looking at any reviews or rankings or ratings, so I wasn't going to care about any of that. And it was just a lovely night. It just felt like such a proud moment, and just lovely to have anybody there. And I think I felt like being an author was what I was meant to do, and it kind of felt all right on that night. It felt like it kind of all kind of came together. It was great. Yeah.
Waterston's events have always been a key thing for me as a reviewer, because that's where I always go. It's Nottingham for me, but I've been to Lincoln, because that's where I went to uni. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's just up the train line from me, Nottingham.
Yeah. Uni's really struggling at the minute. What would you say to any students that are looking to write about what to do while they're locked into their holes at the moment?
Goodness, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it is. I've got friends whose kids have gone in their first year. So they've just arrived, and then they've probably gone into at least 2 weeks of lockdown. So yeah, I'm not really sure what I'd say. I think probably writing isn't going to be the first thing on their mind. I'd say maybe try and find something to read to kind of take their minds off it a bit. And I mean, obviously, if they feel like writing, fantastic. But I think at the moment it's probably such a difficult time for them that they're just trying to work out, how to get through the next couple of weeks and hope they don't have to stay in lockdown.
Yeah. Just on that note, books will be there for everyone out there, and we'd love to have you both on, and good luck with the second book when it comes. If you could show us the book covers so we can pick them out.
Thank you, Alex.
No problem.
Ooh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been absolutely lovely. And I'm going to have to listen back now to catch all Nikki's bits. I was so looking forward to hearing all about how she does it all. And I'm like, I missed it.
Yeah, well, at least I could hear you, Philippa, so it was fine on one side once I switched screens round. So yes, but well done, Alex, for managing to keep us both on here. So yeah, we did well.
It was really interesting. Thank you for both doing it.
Thanks, Alex.
And we've got about